Il presidente Costa ha appena annunciato che sono stati avviati con...
Good evening, President. President Costa has just announced that talks have been initiated between the European Union and Ukraine. I wanted to ask you if you will relaunch, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow at the European Council, the proposal for a single negotiator. Well, I haven't talked about it in recent days. I believe it's a matter that should be developed within the European Council also, because it didn't seem like the right context to highlight different viewpoints on how Europe should position itself towards Russia when there are clearly other countries, other allies.
Is Italy now pushing for a single EU envoy to speak directly with Russia over Ukraine, aiming to streamline fragmented diplomacy? Meloni raises the proposal at the G7 summit, arguing that the EU needs one clear voice to avoid mixed signals on the global stage. Italy suggests that mid-sized EU nations could take the lead in shaping any future envoy system, balancing influence within the bloc. Can the West maintain unity for Ukraine when internal EU structures still appear divided on how diplomacy should actually function? Meloni argues that despite divisions, Western unity remains the most powerful tool for any future negotiations with Russia.
On Ukraine, as you know, we took stock with President Zelensky and reviewed the situation on the ground, which is very different from what certain Russian propaganda continues to try to sell. We all agreed on the need to continue ensuring support for Kyiv while maintaining strong pressure on Moscow. I am very pleased that there is full convergence on this. The unity and firmness of the West continue to be among the most effective tools for creating the necessary conditions for real negotiations. The goal remains to encourage direct talks between Zelensky and Putin, but while Zelensky has so far demonstrated a sincere willingness to resolve the conflict, most recently with an open letter that you all know about, sent directly to President Putin, no serious signal in this direction has come from Moscow, and we believe such signals are now necessary. Israel's role in this will, of course, also be crucial. We expect Israel to act as a constructive participant in the peace process, and that the inevitable domestic debate, driven in part by the election campaign, will not jeopardize the difficult path that the United States has set in motion. We also spent considerable time discussing the Indo-Pacific, a region that is crucial for global trade flows. It was an opportunity to emphasize the importance of doing more to diversify supply chains so that we can reduce our excessive dependencies, with particular attention to critical minerals and rare earth elements, in order to ensure the continuity and security of supplies. As I have already said, these 2 days of meetings also allowed us to address other important issues. We discussed mutually beneficial international partnerships based on a model of cooperation that you are all very familiar with by now. So I'd like to ask whether you had a more formal conversation and how it really went. Was it mainly formal, or was it more playful? Well, let me dispel these stories about joking and laughing. I mean, yes, as you've seen yourselves, in these situations there is always a joke here and there, a moment of levity while waiting for something to begin. But the issues we discussed, including with the President of the United States, were the issues on the summit agenda, so fairly serious matters, from Iran to Ukraine. We also talked about immigration, looking ahead to the next G7, which, as you know, will be held under the U.S. presidency. Right now, the priority is above all to secure peace and define the key points of the memorandum. On Ukraine, I would say we found a degree of convergence that is not always a given. The same applies to issues concerning the Indo-Pacific, economic resilience, the need for greater strategic autonomy to protect ourselves from excessive dependencies, and our relationship with Africa, meaning a form of cooperation that should not be paternalistic or charitable, but rather a partnership among equals, aimed at building a shared future. Good evening, President. President Costa has just announced that talks have been initiated between the European Union and Ukraine. I wanted to ask you if you will relaunch, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the European Council, the proposal for a single negotiator, and if you have spoken in recent days with Merz and Macron about your proposal and the potentially nominated profile. Thank you. Well, I haven't talked about it in recent days. I believe it's a matter that should be developed within the European Council also, because it didn't seem like the right context to highlight different viewpoints on how Europe should position itself towards Russia when there are clearly other countries, other allies. So it is a matter for the European Council. The proposal will be reiterated. I continue to believe that this proliferation of formats ultimately risks to make what Europe can do ineffective because there are many formats, but none of those formats has the authority to speak on behalf of Europe as a whole, and therefore I believe that this issue needs to be resolved. I know that other countries also share the same point of view, and I believe this is a discussion that should be placed within the European Council with calmness to see if there is a possible convergence on this. Convergence on this front. I have seen it, read quite a few names going around. I know where you're heading, as they say in my area, but I think that if one wants to if one wants to achieve a result on this topic, I can tell you this. I believe that it would be very difficult to propose a person coming from one of the largest European countries. I believe that proposing one of these people would make reaching an agreement more difficult from my perspective, and therefore I would turn toward the medium-sized powers of the European Union.
You said that with Trump there have been many convergences on the Indo-Pacific, on Ukraine, which wasn't a given, and on concrete G7 issues. I'd like to ask instead about your personal relationship. There have been videos showing moments of lightheartedness, but obviously also serious discussions. Until a few months ago, you were considered one of Washington's privileged allies within the European Union. Then, for reasons we all know, that relationship broke down because of Sigonella and other issues that were beyond your control. So I'd like to ask, was there a reconciliation, a clarification, a thaw? How would you define it?
What's the headline supposed to be? Look, I would say that I found the relationship unchanged. There wasn't even any need for us to talk about it. There were no recriminations between us, nor did we discuss what happened in recent weeks. Donald Trump and I are both people with rather strong personalities. We are both people who firmly defend our national interests. There's no need for us to clarify when we disagree about something, because each of us understands the other's point of view. So we simply picked up where we left off, talking directly about what needs to be done in the coming months, with the same naturalness as when we last met before this occasion.
And then I wanted to ask you, did you quit smoking?
Well, guys, first it was news because I quit smoking, then because I wore a tie, then because at one point I stood with my hip like this and apparently became... Well, yes, I quit smoking quite some time ago. You just didn't notice in time and missed the story, as we say where I come from. As for Israel, look, I didn't say that Israel might jeopardize the process. What I said is that we need to pay attention to the domestic debate, because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's election campaigns. There is an internal debate that, especially in the run-up to elections, can become more heated. I read, for instance, the remarks of Minister Ben-Gvir, who says, "We do not feel bound by what Donald Trump has signed." Clearly, I think the dynamics are at least partly explained by that. We need to pay attention to this. At the same time, we need to assess how sincere Iran truly is in wanting to close this chapter. We also need to support the Gulf states, which, as you know very well, have gone through some very difficult months and now need to rethink their future to some extent. The Gulf Cooperation Council itself needs to be reconsidered. Many things have changed and need to be rebuilt. This inevitably creates a degree of fragility. But that fragility could also help lead to a much more stable situation than existed before the war began.